Um, Thank you. It's my pleasure to introduce the next panel that is going to deliberate on the presentation and the discussion that we just heard, but also perhaps broaden it a little bit, because as I was listening to Namita and absorbing the data, I've been working in the field of transparency for many years now and engaged quite closely with the Right to Information Act, especially in its early days when it was first passed. And many of the issues that Namita raises in terms of accessing the state laws, the strength and capacity within the government to be able to provide public with information that is essentially in the public interest, are issues that we have confronted on a daily basis across the whole range of public data that we have sought to access through the right to information. In fact, one of the great challenges that we face as researchers, and an issue that comes up often, is, from government's perspective too, that, is right to information really a tool for researchers to use to collect data? But the fact of the matter is that this is data that ought to be in the public domain by virtue of what the Act itself mandates. Section 4 of the Act mandates that all these, a significant portion of this information should be available in the public domain, proactively disclosed by government. Yet it's hard to access. That particular section of the law has been fairly ignored, even in activism of the right to information, where the focus has very much been on people seeking information, actively seeking information from government, rather than government taking upon itself the responsibility of placing information in the public domain. But all our engagement with government also makes us realize that it's easier said than done. There are many challenges, as Sir was just mentioning in the previous session, to placing data in the public domain. Anybody that has ever walked into a government office, as all of us here in this room have, are well versed with the piles and piles of paper that is essentially what government in India is about. And digitizing that paper, making it available in the public domain in a manner that is relevant and useful to the public is not an easy task. And as you rightly mentioned, sir, this is one thing in which we have done everything not to invest in. The assumption that we make very often is that India can leapfrog using technology to streamline its governance systems and make them available. And the assumption here is that technology means you can get rid of people, but in fact, people are the backbone of technology. And in the absence of people, it is simply impossible to physically do any of this that is needed to create a digital database of a lot of our records, which is one of the reasons why it's so difficult for government departments, even if they are willing to follow the norms that Section 4 places of the right to information places on making this information available in the public. The other thing is that information often has to be collated. It is also important for government to recognize what pieces of information are relevant to citizens. And their analysis of the right to information law appeals for applications for information is an extremely important aspect, because often government turns around and says, well, there are reams and reams of data. It's impossible for us to make this available. And we are confronted now with asks for voluminous, frivolous information from the public. And the response that I think the sensible response to this would be to say, well, you receive these applications on a regular basis. It is possible to analyze these applications to at least at minimum understand what information needs of citizens are, and at minimum at least place this information in the public domain. And in that context, given that land disputes are in many ways actually at the heart of many of the engagements that citizens have with the state, it's quite striking that even this very basic piece of information, which is just what laws are out there, in order for citizens to know what the regime looks like, what protections the state is offering, and how disputes can be handled. It's quite striking that even this information isn't available. And those who are in this domain are struggling so hard to be able to figure out what laws there are. So I think these are some of the many challenges that we face. And perhaps, Namita, as a follow-on to once this database is ready, we can think a little bit about what learnings we can draw from this in terms of offering to government some practical solutions on what it would take to maintain databases like this and regularly update these databases, and also provide this information in a manner that is searchable, accessible, and useful for people. So with that, let me start this discussion with Chakshu. I recall back in, I think it was 2008 when you started this exercise, and we had just set up the accountability initiative at CPR and were also desperately seeking data from government and turning grey rapidly faster than we ought to have as we sought through government databases to understand in the space of public finance what government was doing. And we would often share our travails with Chakshu and his team who were facing similar challenges in accessing data. So Chakshu, maybe if you could walk us through the experience of that you've all had in developing the state's laws legislation, but also, database, but also talking to us a little bit about how one can over time make these databases, once they are actually complete, make them relevant and accessible to people so it can be used.
Thank you, Yamini. Thank you, Namita. This is not a wonderful experience for me because this brings back some really, really bad memories of work that me and my colleagues, did for a number of years and still continue to do. So let me start off by kind of making a provocative statement. When PRS was incubated at CPR, a senior colleague wrote a paper, and in his paper he said that nobody in this country has a clue about what is the total number of legislation that are there in this country, right? And I was young and youthful exuberance set in, and I said, that can't be that difficult question to answer. I mean, I'm still nowhere close to answering how many state legislations are there, right? A colleague pointed out that the Supreme Court has an idea about what legislation are there. I don't think so, right? I mean, the Supreme Court's judges library or a High Court judges library, they depend on states sending them gazettes, copies of their laws. And states routinely fall back, on that promise. So states are supposed to send gazette copies of their laws to Parliament Library and also to a central library in Calcutta. That doesn't happen. I mean, it is supposed to happen, but often states just miss out. You can go to the Central Secretariat Library. The Central Secretariat Library is the same mandate. All state libraries are supposed to send their laws in their gazette forms to the Central Secretariat Library. They don't have it. And this simple question that me and my colleagues at PRS wanted to answer about what are the text of these laws which are out there, took us first to these different places in Delhi, the Parliament Library, the Judges Library, the Central Secretariat Library. We weren't able to get those answers. So the next kind of stop was obviously state capitals and figure out with law departments. Now, law departments are roughly across the board, they're not really law departments. They are administrative departments, right? They don't write the law. They are just there to kind of administer 3 or 4 very specific laws related to the High Court and to their own administrative matters. And they are usually, the law department is usually headed by a law secretary or sometimes a legal rembrancer, who's a senior civil judge on deputation to the law department till the time he or she kind of gets elevated to the High Court. So the law department does not have a copy of laws, right? I mean, you would think that a state law department will be the central repository for state legislation. No, they don't. It is the line departments who are supposed to maintain a copy of their own laws based on the demarcation of government responsibilities for the state government, right? So this is where it starts getting even more interesting. The line department thinks that the law department's responsibility is to maintain these laws. Right? So the line department, when they get their law approved through the legislature, they ask for, let's say, 25 copies to be published. They require 25 copies or sometimes 50 copies, depending on the size of the state, of the Gazette to be sent to their office. And they send one copy off to the law department, and they think that now the law department will kind of take care of maintaining it. Different law departments across the country, started doing an exercise of putting together what is called the state code. So it was compilation of books of laws of the state, and then this compilation was, supposed to be updated as and when the legislature changed. The legislature made new laws. Easier said than done, because there is very little coordination at the state level. So the state codes slowly started becoming obsolete, right? Now, I don't think states now even bother publishing state codes. You can go buy some old books, but I think somewhere in the middle of the 90s, they kind of stopped with that. Then you can go to the state's printing press, right? I mean, every state has a printing press. That's where the Gazette and other things are printed. You'll have a little luck there, but one thing you would suddenly realize is they might have a Gazette that you need, but you can't buy it, right? And the reason you can't buy it is a little absurd, but here's the reason. When the Gazette was published, it was published at 25 paisa or 30 paisa, right? Now you're trying to buy a Gazette at 25 paisa, and the state has indexed the cost to increase the cost of that Gazette. The printing department does not know what rate to sell it to you at, right? So here you're standing with money in hand, trying to buy a 25 paisa Gazette at an indexed rate, which is now should be maybe 25 rupees or 30 rupees. You can't buy it because they don't have a rate list to sell it to you at, right? So you kind of, if you're not a researcher and you're an operational person like me, you try to convince the guy that, would it be too hard for him to just give us photocopies and we'll pay for the price of photocopying? But no, I mean, sometimes they have to stick to the rules, and they said, no, either you buy it, because if you photocopy it, then what's the point of having the State Gazette, right? I want to stop there. I think I can go on and on about, what are the different challenges and problems when it comes to, having a coherent kind of a database of state legislation. But there are two or three things. Professor Saab very rightly pointed out the lack of manpower. Legal departments and legal officers within the state departments, there are very few of them left. And the ones that are left, the departments are just waiting for them to retire and then just kind of hive off that post. That's creating an institutional memory gap. And that's not a great thing to happen. So that's one part of the problem. The second part of the problem is pure malice, right? So everybody knows that there's a fair bit of litigation that happens when it comes to land cases, right? Now, usually the law should not get impacted. It's the regulation. So I was told in the Northeast that there are a number of these forest enclaves or forest areas, and there is a notification that is issued to say as to what area is under the Forest Act. Now, you were kind of cutting trees or taking timber or teak or whatever out of the forest, and a case was filed against you. Now, the best way for that case to fall, if that notification which said that this part of forest is not a forest is no longer in the record, right? So many a times, entire, significant areas of those notifications are removed, original notifications are removed from the books, so that, that information is no longer available. So when the state goes to defend its claim, the judges in their, which is rightly so, want to see the record. And when somebody comes to see the record back, they have photocopies. They don't have the original Gazette available to them. So that's the second part, the pure malice, it fails. The third part is the way in which governments treat government information, right? A number of times, what we encountered was governments treated government information as proprietary to them, right? And it kind of, we can talk about the copyright law and, what the copyright law talks about, status of laws as to whether they are copyright free or copyright is applicable to them. So if you wanted to ask an officer for a copy of the law, it is not as straightforward as saying, can I request you to give us a copy, and we are happy to make that copy made. That officer will have to create a chain of paperwork to show as to why he or she shared that information with you. And sometimes officers, while they are well intentioned, don't want to start creating a chain of paperwork saying as to why were you given a set of laws, even though you wanted it for academic research or putting it out there in the public domain. And since everybody touched about RTI, I wanted to add my 2 cents to it. We try to use the RTI law, right? But RTI law is a very adversarial form of retail information getting, right? And if you want to work in those states for a longish period of time, or you want to work with those departments for a longish period of time, sending those RTI requests is counterproductive, right? Second, the design of the law, makes it a very, I will ask and then you will have to provide kind of a thing. I would have rather.
Section 4.
Yeah. So, and this is where Yamini and I would disagree. In this entire big ass piece of legislation, there's just one island of hope, right? So most of us would use that law for the, retail transactional getting of information, and the government in their wisdom is now supposed to, invest in Section 4 and make those things available. I wish the law was the opposite, right? I wish Section 4 was the RTI law, and the retail part of it was a very limited aspect of it. I've had, officers where a digital copy was of the law was maintained, switch off the computer and said, "Kharab ho gaya, ab to nahi milega." Right? So, how you think about that piece of information as to whether it belongs to the public or not, becomes absolutely key in how that information is maintained. If it is only perceived as relevant to the government, then it is maintained in a very different way. Then it is maintained in a very filing form. But if it was perceived that it is for public good and public purpose, maybe a lot more effort would go into, putting it. And since Yamini is here, this is what my closing thought is, because, Yamini's worked extensively on the budgets and we've worked extensively on budgets. You think law is important, right? The annual financial statement, which is the budget of a state or the country, I challenge you so my colleagues were in Maharashtra last week. The Maharashtra budget was being tabled. It weighs about 20 kgs, and the state government puts it in a suitcase. This year it's Samsonite, last year it was American Tourister. So they put those 15 kg of books in a suitcase, and each MLA is given a token that they then go and present and get their suitcase of the budget documents. Only enough are printed for all the MLAs, and maybe about another 50 more for circulation the rest of the team. So there is no copy of the budget for you and me, right? So you stand in the Vidhan Sabha kind of asking people, will you give us your budget copy? And they say, no, isme to suitcase bhi hai. So we say, no, you keep the suitcase, just give us the budget copy, kind of a transaction, right?
Not even digitally?
I mean, it gets digital, but it gets digital eventually, right? So imagine that's supposed to run the state for the entire year, and here we are talking about law. Law is also important, but that's the importance that the state puts on all this kind of information, making it available to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chakshu. That brings back terrible memories of trying to access state budget data and constant phone calls between us to say bartering of आपके पास कौन सा है हमारे पास कौन सा है कितने दिन के लिए ये वाला मिल सकता है कितने दिन के लिए उस वाला मिल सकता है but at least there's some of us who are who have the luxury of talking to each other. I think for most we don't even have that. Chakshu's given us an important perspective from the perspective of those outside government trying to access government laws and data of all forms and the challenges that we face. Can I now turn to you, Deepak, to give us a, since you sit very happily on the insider outsider and shift sides on the fence. So could you give us both perspectives of the challenges within government, the incentive structures within government, and what could we do as researchers, citizens organizations sitting outside to push the incentive structures so relevant information is made available with less gray hair for the rest of us?
Thanks. Yeah, it's, as Yamini says, I have inhabited the inside and I'm now seeking to inhabit the outside. I have in between switched hats and you'll finally hear from Mr. Huq, who's from Professor Huq, who is again switched hats. So you're going to get two of these. Bonanza. Yeah, it's quite dismal at one level, getting information in government. I have often wondered, as having been inside, at how much time is invested and what a success it seems to be to people that I managed to get hold of some information. You know, always has astonished me and made me wonder. I used to get puzzled by it at one time, till I realized what a huge time is invested in making sure that information is not available, actually. And what a premium there is on hoarding it, on parting with it is. My biggest discovery actually was when I worked in the Ministry of Finance in Delhi, that how much of information is power here. In the state, it was much less. I mean, or maybe I was in a small state. I was also, you know, at a relatively lower level and sort of didn't even think too much about these things. But once I came to Delhi, I really discovered how important power is. I mean, information is and what a source of power it is. But we'll talk a little more about this. We have plenty of time. I'm sure there'll be questions. I'll just say on accessing, I just thought of, we discussed lots of sources. I don't know why we didn't look at this, or maybe we looked at it and we didn't remark on it in the course of our discussion since morning. What about Parliament and Legislative Assembly libraries and their setups for accessing information on acts? I don't know. I mean, in my poor little state, I find my Legislative Assembly is probably a better source of information on acts passed than the government itself. But I don't know. Maybe you guys have looked at it and we just forgot to mention it in the course of the morning. How to increase disclosure? This is a really tough call. I agree. I mean, ideally we should just, Section 4 should be, you know, more, should be the source of more information. I mean, people should be letting out more information, but as we've just hinted, you know, nobody really wants to part with information. How to increase it? I think in the limited context of this exercise, I'll start with that. I would say, Namita, there's no harm in just writing to a lot of secretaries in states and saying, can you make it more accessible on the net? Maybe some of them will actually do it, you know. Let's not think it's all so dark. There are some people who might actually make available more information on the net, simply because you point it out to them that it's not available. It does happen. And that might be a starting point. It's a simple exercise of just writing a letter, finding out the name, writing what in government is called a DO letter, and saying, you know, this is the situation, and can you enhance the availability of laws, on the net in your state and write to the number of secretaries who you think would be related to land and say, can you put your laws on the net? And I think you might actually get something happening in some states. It's not all that dark. How to actually generate an incentive for doing more? I don't know. I think finally we'll just have to wait for AI to access more. Yes, it is AI which will finally do our jobs.
But we'll still need to digitize.
Yeah, we'll have to digitize, but digitization will happen. It's happening willy-nilly. There's a certain inertia to it of making available more stuff, and not in a good index form, not in a very nice form, but more and more stuff is coming out on the net. It'll just increase. It's not, and that is not a black picture, and good or bad, AI will start distilling it for us and bringing it more to our notice. Meanwhile, can we do more about incentives to do this? I don't know. I'm after so many years at this, I think it's just opportunistic. It can be just serendipitous. Sometimes someone will put more stuff on the net. Someone will do a little more. I don't think, it was very black, and I think it is black. Chaksu painted a very black picture, and it is pretty black. It will finally just have to depend on some guys being more proactive. And that number who are proactive will always be very small, who will actually do something. I remember once, many years ago, bringing out a compendium on what in Himachal is called Section 118, a section of the Tenancy Reform Act which prohibits outsiders from buying land in Himachal. And how can that be done? What is the process? What are the instructions on the subject? I once brought out a small compendium on that and put it on the net. The most positive things I've ever heard in my life, other than some other things, is on this. That you brought it out and put it on the net. I thought it was such a meaningless little thing to do that I just put them together, all the instructions on the subject, and said, put it on the net. I didn't realize to this day, so many years later, people still say, oh, that was one of the greatest things you did. What nonsense. It was just putting out something on the net. But it brings home all the time how difficult it is to really get access to information in government, and how the incentive structure is really not favoring it. And we'll just have to wait for little things to happen for it to become more accessible. I'll park this on the side and just speak for 2 or 3 minutes on the second part of your work. What to analyze? We get the stuff on the net, we find it, let us hope now. What do we really look for? Today you told us you're looking at subject, what do the laws relate to? You're looking at source, where do the laws come from? Whether it's colonial, it's post-colonial, it's customary maybe. You're looking at spread, what is the geography of it, how do states look at it, and you divide all this by state. But finally, what is going to become most important is what has been, in a sense, referred to or spoken about, in some sense tangentially today, is usage.
Yeah.
What do the laws really end up being used for? Most difficult. You're going to have most difficulty in looking at it, but it really is related to the first point you made, Namita. What is law for? It is about constructing a rule-based society. So is it being used? Is the rule being used? If not, in this most legislated of countries in the world, or the most over-legislated, where everything becomes an excuse for making a law. Law is an excuse for action on anything and everything. And we seldom look at the issue of, is that law of any meaning at all? Is it being used? What is it coming to what end? That, I think, is something which we'll have to find a way of looking at. That's one of the reasons people are not aware of laws or not putting it to, it's not even available. One of the reasons is that the law is so meaningless. It was made as a subjective response at that moment because the patron thought that this is a good thing to do in terms of either prime minister or chief minister or particular minister. And it was actually such a immediate response to something that it was never going to be used. Or it was really pushed by a lot of civil society, which sees law as a precursor of social change, as something which is going to bring about revolutionary change in society, and completely forgot that 99% of people really don't look at it at all as that way, and therefore it's going to get put on the shelf anyway, even as we declare victory. So, which are the laws which get used, which don't get used, and how do we then push some of this law which we want used? Maybe other questions which might become, it might be useful for those people who want to use the law for a particular purpose and find that it's really not getting anywhere. So basically the point is there'll be a lot of spin-offs, but how do we look at utility of laws, its usage, finally. So I hope that we can address that in some fashion at some stage. And the usage may also then spin off questions of what was the purpose of the law and what actually it got used as. Also, maybe another spin-off. And in land records, it will be very interesting to see this, especially in land laws, that how all your tenancy and ceiling laws and all your rent control laws and all those well-meaning laws to aid and stop alienation of land to non-agriculturalists, make sure that usage is productive, etc., how does it finally actually get used? How is it circumvented? What happens? Maybe interesting areas to look at in the future. I'll stop. We can have more discussion.
Thank you, Deepak, especially for highlighting the really important point of information is as powerful as it could be if it gets used effectively. The usage is what determines the power of the information, and that's definitely something to think about. Can I now turn to Dr. Haq? As chairman of the land cell of Niti Aayog, I think it'll be really wonderful for us, apart from any other general comments that you might have, to also get your sense of, as the sort of conversation about land acquisition is evolving within government, the role of transparency around land laws and what that could do to strengthen the debate.
Thank you. First of all, I should say that at least I will not try to depict a pessimistic picture or a black picture, although it could be. But the point is, things are improving. Why I am saying things are improving? Because in a digital India, when there is so much of emphasis by the Prime Minister's office that everything has to be transparent and digitized, the focus is all on good governance, and still there is so much of gap. I think this is a cause for worry and concern. And I think if you write properly to the right person, I'm sure this will be addressed. We are discussing this, but even this message goes to the right persons, I'm sure this will be taken care of at least to a great extent, if not fully. And if not fully and immediately, there are reasons for this. The main reason, as Mr. Sastry was mentioning, particularly if you talk about the land departments, which gives you all this data, or land laws and all this, or which are supposed to keep the those records or the laws copies, they have a real problem everywhere, both in the center and also in the states. You will find they don't have many people. All your land department, land reforms department, or land revenue departments, or your tribal affairs ministries, they lack both in financial resources, they lack both in staff, and also they lack in capacity. And also in many cases, because of all this, they lack interest. So all these four factors, when they combine together, probably things do not move and we do not get what we want from them. But as on today, there is so much of focus on digitization, transparency, good governance, and even then, if we don't have access to some of the data that are already there, I think this is certainly a cause for concern. Second thing is, as Mr. Sastry rightly mentioned, that if you try to get the new laws or new data, for instance, in this respect, probably it is easy to get, but if you try to see the digitized copy of the old records or the old laws, like sealing laws passed in the first phase in the 60s, or afterwards also even in the 70s, or the prevention of alienation of tribal land, those laws, even some of the things were there in the pre-independence period. So if you ask some state government or the line departments to do it, they will say, no, time hi kahan hai? And in fact, my own experience in the government is that we spend more time in meetings and finally, sitting late, and finally, nothing comes out of that. 99% of time of the senior staff go just in meetings, and they will ask the junior people to say, aisa karo, and then for a day or two, they will be busy doing some things, and then afterwards, then again some next other things come, and then they become busy again with that, and nobody knows where they were some few days back. So there are real problems the way government functions. This is also true. But then this can be streamlined and improved if there is a way, willingness on the part of the, some committed, at least bureaucrats, chief secretary and others at the state level. I'm sure this can happen. I give you one very interesting example why I say this, because there are two things. One thing is accessing the land laws. Many of the land laws are very old, as you also said, that things are not, the law-making process itself is slow today. First of all, it could be like many people don't think these laws were, that relevant, and it was made in a particular context, and things have changed, but still they find it quite sensitive. In the case of land laws particularly, still some people in the government think that anything relating to land or affecting land rights or land relations is very sensitive. So even if you try to move fast, this is my own experience, things will not move so fast. There will be people to say from various departments, because it is not just one person decides and things happen. Even the Prime Minister, if he wants to do it, he will not be able to do it. There are, departments around him who will examine it, legal department, the line department, then other, allied departments, and then they will give their comments. And somebody can just kill at some point. I am giving one very interesting example. On the land leasing law of Madhya Pradesh, they passed a new law about a year back, more than a year back. And what happened? It came to the center, it came to the Home Ministry. Then Home Ministry sends it to 4 or 5 line departments: agriculture, land resources, then rural development, and also the legal affairs. So all these ministries, gave some comments, and after the comments, Agriculture Ministry said, no, I think this is still missing. It should be, sent back to the state government for further comments and clarification. So it was again sent back. So that process took more than a year. Only this week, only 3 days back, I talked to the Joint Secretary concerned in the Home Ministry. He said, sir, now we have sent it to the President for assent. So you can see how much time it takes just for a small change to make. So lawmaking will be a slow process because of that also. One is procedural, one is whether you really think that that change should come, or you need amendments to come, whether the people's awareness are there, the demand is there. I mean, FRA, why it happened? There was a pressure from the civil society all around that you need to do it. So FRA, even right to information, that was again the people's pressure which made this kind of change. But again, unless you pursue it, the people themselves take it seriously, I think it will get stuck somewhere, and then nothing, you get out of that. So these are the processes. You need also people's awareness, people's organizations, civil society has a role. All of us, like you as a researcher, you need data, and you are not getting data. Whom you will write? You have to put pressure you have to put pressure that I need this information, I need to analyze these laws. These laws have become archaic, we need to improve. And in order to improve, unless you analyze the laws and put up an alternative framework, how do you go about it? You will not be able to go. I mean, you lose just at the first point itself, entry point. So I think, but then if you write to the all concerned, whether it is line department or even the Prime Minister's office or whosoever, Prime Niti Aayog or whosoever, I think they will be responsive, and I'm sure they will help you at some point. I don't know how much, but if somebody, officers themselves say they are all useless kind of things, we don't need research, we don't need any improvement, we need things to go as they are going. So then again, you will have some problem. But at least there will be somebody to respond and take responsibility. Government, I think things are not as bad as many of us think. Still, there is hope, and sometime government response. I tell you one very interesting example. In the same Department of Land Resources, some 6-7 years back, I used to get all the data on implementation of land reform laws. Like you get to know how much ceiling surplus land has been redistributed in different states. You also get to know how many tenants have been conferred ownership right or occupancy rights in different states. You also get to know how much land consolidation has taken place or not taken place, and all these details. But from 2006 onward, you don't get this kind of information because some officer at the center decided, kya karna hai sab information ko, anyway this is there at the state level. And because there is no monitoring or requirement from the center, even the state governments take it easy, so they don't also compile those informations, and they don't keep it, and they don't send it. But if there is a demand for this kind of thing, I think recently when some years back, I think 2-3 years back, Vandana Jena was the Secretary Department of Land Resources. Somebody approached her for getting gender disaggregated data of land ownership and operational holdings and all that. She took some initiative. She wrote to all the state governments, and even also she wrote to the NSSO and agriculture census people. So now they are generating that data, and things, I think you will be able to access those data very soon. So it happens. Similarly, in the case of West Bengal, I remember there was no separate column on the register to record the name of women or wife if there is a joint ownership of land. Like if there is only one column, and invariably they put the name of the husband, not the wife. Now, somebody noticed it. In fact, Landas has had a role in that to find out and tell them, and they now have corrected. So they are doing it now. So sometimes government also responds. It is not that all the time whatever you ask for they don't give. So they will be responsive. Third thing is, I must compliment CPR, Namita and her colleagues for doing this kind of exercise, because many of the laws you will find have become archaic. Because the Forest Right Act of the British time was not good, we changed it in 2006. Similarly, Land Acquisition Act in 2013, that was the reason 1894 Act was irrelevant in the present context. So we demanded a change, and change has come, but we are not again implementing it. Again, it has been diluted further by some of the state governments. That freedom has been, not freedom, in fact, when Tamil Nadu law came for President's assent, it was sent to the Department of Land Resources for comments. Without much thinking, they just referred it, saying all good about it. And the President gave his assent, and Tamil Nadu has now separate state law for land acquisition. Similarly, there are several, 4-5 states at the same time they got their state laws passed. So the point is, you need the bureaucracy to be very, committed to the cause of the, not only the researchers but also the poor for which the laws are made, the people for whom the laws are made. And if somehow somebody just dilutes it, it gets diluted and things get stuck somewhere, and then again you go on fighting for change, and again things like that. But we all researchers also have a role, both particularly social science research. I think this is one important role we need to play. Demand it. You will get something, and then create awareness among all concerned, civil societies have a role. I think we'll get to somewhere near that point and we'll achieve something. It is not as bad as it should be. And the slow process of lawmaking in the context of land, I already mentioned that land is normally considered to be very sensitive. Despite that, we try to push things, it does not happen for various reasons. There are procedural problems and also political problems. Just one, in the case of Orissa, about 2 years back, the Orissa government decided that they will go for a new law on land leasing and all that. Everything was drafted, ready. When the Panchayat election came, they said, no, I think we should wait. We should try to see only after the Panchayat election. Panchayat election was over. Then the revenue minister and the agriculture minister both were changed who were piloting this. So then afterwards, everything has stopped. So now again, somebody has to convince the new agriculture minister, new revenue minister that you need to do it. Then only things will move. So they are all procedural problems and all that, and also it has some political issues. So I think there are various reasons for this. But anyway, I think you are doing a good job, I must say, and anything that you need from me, at least in my individual capacity or official capacity, I will try to help you. Thank you.
The second thing is I just want to welcome Professor Sridhar Acharyulu, who is the Information Commissioner at the Central Information Commission. Professor Acharyulu was scheduled to speak tomorrow on the land laws database. He's informed us that he has cases tomorrow and won't be able to come, but he has come today. And so I would request Mr. Sanan if you would allow Professor Sridhar to speak about some of these issues.
Thank you very much, and sorry for this inconvenience. I will be dealing with the issues of transparency, which is totally lacking as far as land acquisition process is concerned. Even in Delhi, some people who are talking Delhi is highly aware. People are highly aware, and every court is available, every lawyer is available. But I'll tell you one example. There was one farmer who lost his one house, dwelling house, in Palem for the airport 20 years ago or 25 years ago. He came in with a RTA request asking for the information why he was not paid compensation and what happened to the promise of alternative plot. And the Land Acquisition Department of Delhi government, Revenue Department of Delhi government, and there is another department which is supposed to take care of this. I forgot its name. Three of them said the information is available in another office. And ultimately none of them gave any information. And what he said was, I can't afford any litigation in Delhi High Court or anywhere. So if possible, give me information with which I can fight for compensation and piece of land. Otherwise, I'll keep quiet, because I can't afford. I can't lose further. So that is the situation in this country, in Delhi. And this is not just one example. I have dealt with hundreds of such second appeals when I was dealing with Delhi government. And all the RTA requests with reference to land acquisition, compensation, alternative plot will hit a stone wall, and nobody gives any information. And one of the most common defenses that I came across from the public authorities is, file is missing, and they are missing. And this fellow doesn't get even a compensation. I imagine the plight of a farmer or owner of a residential house in Palem who loses his house but doesn't get compensation, does not know where the record is, and can't think of alternative plot. This is the reality. Then another very interesting feature is where alternative plot is suggested to be taken, he has to pay the price fixed by the DDA. And whereas the compensation offered is again fixed by the Land Acquisition Office, which will be far low than anybody can imagine, because it is under the British legacy legislation, you know, last century's legislation. So that is the problem of land transparency with related to land acquisition. Now, I have one issue. Your study has rightly pointed out that nobody should bypass the legislation, new land acquisition law. I totally agree with you. But there is a wholesale, high-scale avoiding of new law by Andhra Pradesh government in the name of land pooling. And land pooling, by process of land pooling, they have acquired 33,000 acres of land. And the problem is not that they should not do it, but how is that they guarantee a better benefit than the law? Where is that they have committed to it? And what is the document by which they get that right? And whether there is a format that you have that put out in your website, or are you giving a copy, certified copy of the agreement that has reached between him and the developer? And the fun part of it is nobody knows who the developer is. Whether it is a Singapore fellow or a Japan fellow or a Hyderabad fellow or a Vijayawada fellow, nobody knows. Amaravati fellow, nobody knows. Who will guarantee the benefit? Nobody knows. Whether government comes up with any disclosure about possible benefits that are promised or to be given, nothing. There is no guarantee. And if it happens, they are luckiest people. If it doesn't happen, it is not even a point of single column news in the media. So that is the situation of transparency when they bypass the land acquisition law, new law. New law is totally avoided. And new program is not at all disclosed. And a person asking for information will never get, because there is no mechanism right to information in Andhra Pradesh. There is no second appeal possibility because there is no commission, State Information Commission, for the last several years, and not even in near future. So this is the problem of transparency. And coming to the other successes of farmers or land acquisition, the losers in land acquisition in cities like Delhi and other metropolitan cities. First of all, they ask for land records. The answer, stock answer that they get is, it is private personal information of third party and you cannot get it. And nobody knows what exactly the third party is. And definitely it will not fall under third party. Every land transaction is registered as an immovable property transfer. And once it is registered, it is for verification. The purpose of registration is creating evidence of transaction and notice of transaction to the whole world. And it has to be verified and re-verified. But government of Delhi and revenue officers come out and say it is third party information. We don't give. Privacy, law of privacy, a fundamental right of I don't know whose. And they say they simply refuse. And second most important defense they use is Section 2F of Right to Information Act. 2F defines what information is. He says, suppose he asks whether I was given compensation under so-and-so clause of law is the question. He says, I will not answer the questions. Clarifications are not supposed to be asked because it is not information. But your basic core activity is to tell the people what you are going to do. Then he will not give clarification for that. Then another wonderful defense is 81B. He says the case is pending in court of law. Sub judice is no defense, but he uses it as a defense. Then is some inquiry somewhere must be going on some point of time. It must have been completed, but yet he says inquiry is going on, I will not give you. Even that is not the defense available in RTI Act. And there are similar such defenses. And 81J, I told you, and then third party information. There is a difference between third party information and privacy clause. In privacy clause, if you find public interest, you can disclose immediately. If PIO considers it, there is some public interest in it. In third party related information, you have to consult the third party. But you have no authority, you have no legal authority to invoke the third party, and not even 81J. These are two totally misused. People are talking about misuse of RTI. But I would like to say the public authority is misusing RTI by quoting these unnecessary sections which cannot be attracted. So these are the problems of transparency. There are two parts of RTI as far as land acquisition is concerned. First part is a very important part. Section 4(1)(b) says, clause 3 says, procedure followed in decision-making process should be disclosed on their own. So what procedure you have adopted in deciding the land to be acquired? And what are the relevant facts and circumstances that led you to decide acquisition of that particular land? You have to put on your own in the public domain without somebody asking for it under Section 4. They don't do it. Then another clause that imposes an obligation of voluntary disclosure is 13 under 4(1)(b). You have to disclose the channels of supervision and accountability. What happens if there is a mistake in my record, the land which you acquired? Suppose there is a wrongful statement of measure, extent of my land. Where do I get it corrected? You have to announce it. They don't do it. And another area is all new policies that you take, you have to disclose facts, relevant circumstances, and whatever information you have about that policy, which led you to take that policy, has to be disclosed on your own, 4(1)(c). They don't do it. And whichever administrative decision of yours affects the public in general, has to be in public domain without somebody asking for it, but nobody gives it. So people like you, the organizers of this wonderful study, I suggest you must help the people in getting 41BA, 41C being implemented, and that will help in a big way the losers of the land are those whose land is acquired in this country, in this part of the city. So that is most important. Another point I would like to say is, if you update land records, if you clean land records, if you clear the defects in the land records, you will solve 68% of present litigation. I'm not talking about land disputes only. The entire litigation in the country, if you take that as a unit, 68% of that is land-related disputes. And if you clear or clean the land records, do you know what will happen? The main effect is land records will be clean. Do you know what is the side effect? Judiciary will be reformed. Side effect is very serious. 68% of cases you can be cleared off. What a wonderful possibility of, I was dreaming, will there be any day where Supreme Court will enjoy another additional 1 month vacation? Is it possible? I think it is possible if you clear the land records. And again, I don't believe it. It depends on so many things. And what is the amount of money that is being spent by the government in resolving land dispute? 3,000 crores a year. 3,000 crores a year, according to a study. I don't have the citation, I'll give you that citation. 3,000 crores a year, government is spending on land disputes, not on any other thing. And what is the expenditure that people are incurring in? 25,000 crores. Poor will lose further in the courts of law in our country. Poor will lose. And you think that he has nothing to lose, but he will lose. I don't know how, and the economists should tell me how is that this loss can be recouped. See, this is the problem. And another problem is, another issue is, even if you have cleared the land records and cleaned the land records, what is that you are doing to present it in public domain? Are you doing anything? Nothing. So first is clean the records. Second is you have to emphatically ask for disclosure of entire land records in public domain, whether it is in digital form or in the writing on the wall, or a hard copy hanging on the notice board of the Panchayat office, I don't know, or maybe 3 of them. So this has to be done. And there should be open process of rectification of defects of land records. If you can ensure this, I think there is a possibility of achieving the goals that you are aspiring for. And I appreciate you for studying these cases. I'd like to tell you, you must have studied the Supreme Court judgments. I studied 400 judgments of lower courts where farmers approached the court of law for enhancement of compensation for land acquired. And the result, findings are very pathetic. After 15 years of fight, the increase was 150 rupees in all. 150 rupees compensation is increased. So if, even under the new law, I sincerely feel, even under the new law, if a farmer or a person who owned the land, who lost the land, is made to litigate, he will not get anything as a matter of compensation. He will not get anything, and he will further lose, and that loss will never be compensated. So don't imagine that anybody will have access to lawyer. A lawyer is affordable. Even if lawyer is affordable, justice is affordable. It is not possible. He will not get anything in this country of litigation and pendency of litigation. Nothing he will get. So what is it we have to do is, we have to make executive to pay at the first instance itself the sufficient compensation to the farmer or the owner of the land when you acquire his land. So these are the points I thought I should take. Thank you very much for the kind opportunity.